Punchline, Night Terrors, I'm here. Thought I forgot about Punchline because we didn't end up talking about issue 6 of the Gotham game. We'll get there. I just had to recover from issue 5 having an editor's note that led to the wrong place. But now we're in Night Terrors and we have Punchline versus the internet. And of course that means online trolls. And we're going to talk about why it almost works but doesn't quite get there. It also falls into a problem that not just Punchline suffers from, but just depictions of online communication in mainstream comics in general. And not even necessarily online communication, but just online culture and the many facets that can exist and the many avenues to explore that aren't. So firstly, I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics. We talk about Punchline a decent amount on this channel. We have an entire playlist, and despite the slight potential meta attempts to poke digs at people who would critique this, we're still going to. You make me sound like one of those terminally online losers who spend all day talking about me. Again, slight and potential because they are discussing online minutia, and so there is some terminology you will see there, and it is correctly employed, but it could also be used as a blanket dismissal, but we'll see, it's probably not meant that way. It's hard not to be conspiratorial because sometimes things do sneak their way into works like that. Rule number 1, son, trust no one. But what's going on? We're about to be talking about Night Terrors, a 2023 horror event initially releasing across August and July. The main event involves characters from the DC universe becoming trapped in a nightmare realm. This has led to a whole host of 2-issue tie-ins where we get to see the characters' various nightmares. This is Punchlines. It's written by Danny Lore with art by Lucas Mayer and colors by Alex Guimaraes. Lettering Steve Wands. And side note, there appears to be some kind of miscommunication between colorist and letterer, or just whoever balanced the lighting or colors on the pages, at least in the digital version, because there are parts where it's difficult to read. There are some parts where the back glow of the internet screen renders some of the text a bit difficult to discern. And then you have moments like the end of chapter 2 where you can't really read the names of people because of where it's placed on the image. They're brief moments, but they're worth noting, because one of the main things about your comic is you want people to be able to read it with ease. Now we need some Punchline cliff notes for those who are just entirely new to Punchline. She's fairly new, time of recording, new-ish, so you may have missed her. Punchline burst onto the scene back in 2020 as a new character for the Joker, billed as the Joker's girlfriend. That was by media outlets. In the comics themselves, it was more ambiguous. You would have some depictions where it was leaning that way, others where it was more of a protege type relationship. So you had a bit more ambiguity, especially under the hands of her creator, James Tynion. He's one of her creators. Jorge Jimenez was the other. But in the first stories, you would see people playing with that angle a little bit. Just what exactly was her motivation and what exactly was her exact relationship to the Joker. Now, while she was billed by some as a discount ripoff or a Harley knockoff, and there are some reasons why one could come to that conclusion, there were other elements to her that contained huge potential and ways that the similarities between her and Harley were twisted in interesting directions. And all of that gave Punchline, aka Alexis K, a possible spot of her own that she could occupy, her own little niche. Because there are many characters that share similarities, but it's the ways that you differentiate them that can really make them stand out and also make them feel unique, or make the elements they're playing with feel like they're being expanded upon. Punchline was/is a monster, and the comics led with that before expanding upon her. She's a truly heinous person. She would experiment with her drugs on homeless people and children. She has an extremely nihilistic worldview, which she feels aligns with how she interprets the Joker's message or joke. She is extremely manipulative, and thanks to being very online savvy, because she's very hooked into that kind of culture, she uses her online status to manipulate people, and she's very aware of how to do so. She's used the internet to carve not just an image for herself and help her craft her Punchline persona, but also to carve a sympathetic version of herself as well, playing with the parasociality that can develop through online relationships. And online presence was always a key part of the character, as it was shown not only how she was able to fall down rabbit holes and find the Joker's past hideouts and the like, but how her content and seeming confidence were able to cause others to gravitate towards her. And even in some cases, if the person was in a bit of a, say, vulnerable position, radicalize them. But it also showed in some cases how people would attach themselves onto her in hopes of clout of their own. Now, in all fairness, some of the interplay and nuance of parasocial relationships was not always depicted in her early outings, meaning it was usually a very one-sided look at it. It was very keen on making a certain point, and so some of the facets of how parasociality works were pushed by the wayside or downplayed, such as in the profile of Punchline, there wasn't a proper balance of people critiquing her and people supporting her. They did not show enough people roasting her for her crying apology, but the work was more focused on the horror of how a terrible person, and what some of you is obviously a terrible person, could amass such a following, which does happen. It happens all the time, and not just online. There also wasn't a full interrogation of how one's own life circumstances could leave one vulnerable to dangerous messaging, or that could come in many forms, including forms that could look positive or uplifting or benign, but when taken to extremes can become dangerous. But the bones were there. Now the problem Punchline had at the gate, well actually there were a couple. One was once it was seen that there was some initial interest, which there was, she was pushed hard. A bit too hard, especially in terms of being presented as an absolute powerhouse with no flaws. This Night Terror falls a bit into that trap too. And even though she very rapidly did start to lose that aspect to her character, they did introduce her losing fights or making mistakes, that first impression lingered. Also, despite her connection to the Joker being a large part of what made her intriguing, moves were made to sever that as quickly as possible and have the character just stand on her own before she had developed a clear mission statement, or which of the Bat family or other characters she would be linked up with, or just her own staying power and a reason to be invested in her outside of the Joker. It takes time to build that up. Harley Quinn may have become quite the standout character. That took decades. The initial popularity was one thing, but the staying power, that took time to build. And they didn't just sever her connection with the Joker right away. Even when she broke up with him, which did happen relatively soon, they still tried to explore that aspect of her. They didn't shove it to the background. Now they do. Which is what a lot of the Punchline works seem to be trying to do. Time for recording, all these problems surrounding Punchline still persist. When one is trying to build up a villain, it does need to be clear exactly which hero they will be attached to, and that still has yet to happen. They also need at least some kind of discernible goal, even if that goal is chaos. Even the idea of looking for clout or relevance or dethroning the Joker hasn't been fully locked in for Punchline. She still needs that arc to bring her to the next level. Night Terror's Punchline is not that moment. It's not that arc. With all that said, just what was her nightmare? We open up in this issue with Punchline, the Royal Flush Gang, and they're on their way to the Clock Tower. The Royal Flush Gang also looks different than the last time you may have seen them in the Gotham game, but Punchline went on from that to then they just kind of spun that into Catwoman. It's been interesting if you're following Punchline as she goes around. Interesting may not be the right word. Frustrating. So she's going to try and take down communication from Barbara, aka Batgirl, aka Oracle, because time of recording, Barbara's in a position where she's just doing all of those roles at once. Now when Punchline is pulled into the nightmare, she doesn't realize it at first. Not even when she kills Batgirl. An important thing to note that is kind of played of here and is a stronger moment, and it would have been even cooler if they'd lean into it more and just added that trippy element, is that it has been shown in other appearances, namely Punchline's 2022-2023 miniseries, The Gotham Game, that because of her exposure to her own chemicals and her lack of regard for proper safety measures, she at times hallucinates and has potentially done permanent damage to herself. Sometimes she's not sure what's real or what she's hallucinating, and sometimes she'll refer to hallucinated events as if they actually happened. So it would have been neat to see that play more into her not realizing what is a dream, or when she fully comes out that she is, or at least just have some drama around it, because the tone of this never really feels very dreamlike or frightened or frightening. It's hard to sell a nightmare if you A, don't build up that sense of dread in the surroundings or story itself, or if the character never really seems to feel frightened or threatened. Green Lantern kind of has that problem too. Green Lantern skirts the edge of that by at least having a lot of really obviously horrifying imagery and working the fact that Hal isn't afraid into the bones of the story itself, trying to marry that to his character of the man without fear, Daredevil. Now Punchline does realize that she's in some kind of dream when a techno-organic zombie Barbara tries to kill her, but this is important to note, that's not really her core fear. There's not really a core fear presented in this first issue, even if the positioning of Barbara as antagonist is a good one, since Babs as Oracle is the tech head of the Bat family, so thematically there were things to work with there, because she's so online and linked into that same world that Punchline is. For instance, there is a good sequence as Punchline approaches all the monitors and sees they're covered with images of her. You've got the whole world in front of you. Didn't realize Batgirl was a fangirl. Couldn't she just like old social media posts like a normal stalker? Now this is delivered with Punchline's usual flippancy. Alexis has a too cool for school kind of attitude. She doesn't care about anything. She's always unbothered. Basically, she's depicted as just not really caring much about things. And this issue cements that as true. However, if there was a place to dive into Punchline's insecurities without placing her in a blameless victim position, which exploring her flaws doesn't have to, it would be inside her own nightmare. But these issues don't really play with that much. But there's so much to explore here. Think about it. Punchline is a person who has become obsessed with the Joker, and by extension, his messaging / worldview. This after encountering him in a hostage situation. So seeing him at his worst, which is very different than how, say, Harley encountered him. Now, questions were raised about whether this encounter with him is what sent Alexis down the path she went down, which was looking online to find all of his old hideouts and all of his drug recipes and all of those things. Or if there was already a darkness there and it just needed a direction or outlet, and if it hadn't been the Joker, it would have been something else. But because of this encounter allowed her to mold a kind of derivative or inspired by kind of persona around him. She has been birthed by his influence on Gotham, which is one of the interesting ways she could be tied to Batman, since him letting the Joker run around as he does could be viewed as indirectly creating her, playing into the whole does he create the villains he fights argument, and also asking that question on a generational level through Punchline. That also could strengthen her character, because now you're not just looking at direct influence, but indirect trickle down, and that's interesting, especially in a world like Gotham where people just have to live their lives with all of these things running around constantly in the background. What does that do to a person growing up like that? Also plays well with her being a bit annoying and tryhard, but I digress. Punchline purposely crafted her image online, so she knows it can be done. She's seeking relevance and clout from it, and also other things, but those are things she's looking for. It would make sense for her to fear the same thing being done to her, especially because she's so aware. Like, you would know that there would be cosplayers, knockoffs, people trying to ride your coattails or become the next new hotness. Even just the stress of trying to maintain being the new hotness. Trends and drama move so quickly online, so how long could you maintain top spot? Villain burnout. What a topic. Running through metas, they run so fast. Think about how fast the NPC meta came and died. You could play into a lot of potential ideas of her not succeeding or just many things through the screens. They could play out those fears, but instead it's just used as a joke about how people can tend towards stalking online. Which, side note, is a real problem and a behavior that comes to be more and more normalized as time goes on. Just the idea that completely looking up a person's entire social media, all of them, maybe even looking into where they live or their address or doxing them is normal. It's not. The erosion of the concept of privacy and what it looks like for people who grew up never considering it, and just the ripple effects that that's having and how there's some pushback against it, like you see with the family channels and the filming of the kids. See, what I'm saying is that there are so many interesting things happening online. So many things to play with and so many concerns around that could be worked in various aspects, and some of them could be applied to Punchline, not all, but some. Now, the idea that Punchline would find some of these activities normal is interesting and worthy of exploration and something that would work well with the age of her character, but that doesn't happen here. But we do get an on-point joke at least. It was well placed, well utilized, it made sense. It just didn't add to the story in all the ways that it could. It could have had more layers. So like much of Punchline's existence, squandered potential. Basically, there's a whole parasocial ecosystem, and then that also feeds into other outside fears and personality traits, and if combined incorrectly or just in a bad way or through bad circumstances, can create some truly toxic behaviors. Basically, there should be tons of content about Punchline online, and just she would be a hot topic, and it would be positive and negative. So you could play with that fear of losing control of one's image or how they're presented online. To have someone wrest control of that away from her would be distressing. Also, we could focus on other aspects of her that exist. She trained herself to kill all on her own, after all. Now, all of the shoulda, woulda, couldas aside, no real fears are brought up in this first issue. Even zombie technobabs, like, okay, that's a cool image, but what does it represent? Like, Batman didn't just vomit up a gun bat demon for no reason. The Joker has a day job for a reason. The imagery presented should tie into something for the character, and Punchline is so new that some of it still needs to be laid out. And a lot of the impact is lost because they went for Batgirl babs and not oracle babs, which would have worked a lot better for the imagery that they're choosing. Because think about it, you could have oracle babs in her chair just kind of emerging from the very background of the computers themselves, just kind of melded to it, just all of it attached, and that could be a kind of symbolic visual metaphor for being that idea of being terminally online or jacked into that kind of culture. And then the zombie element could represent, is she even a person at this point, or just a mindless zombie controlled by all of these various images and things that are being inputted into her? Or just solve another potential fear, voice recording that can, because we're not playing with auditory stuff a lot in this, but voice recording that comes out of the computer and it's from the Joker, and it can say that she's the joke, because part of her thing is being controlled and also thinking that she's important to the Joker, or just in general. But to find out that she's just a pawn, or that she misinterpreted his message or the joke, that would be something devastating and something to be afraid of. But then you'd have to play with the Joker interplay, which I really think they should still play more with, personally. Okay, issue 2, the fear issue. Punchline gets sucked into the computer and finds herself tumbling through forums and message boards. And she ends up on a hate site, and that means she has to confront mean comments. Dun dun dun. Okay, rant time. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do a good and relevant mean comments plot, but I am saying there's a huge missed opportunity, not just in general, but in terms of Punchline specifically. But let's start with the generalities. Time for recording, there's just a lack of variety when it comes to mainstream comics depicting online minutia and just culture. It very often boils down to character versus hate comments, or character versus memes, which are often characterized as just hate comments. And then the commenters are most often just characterized as trolls en masse, basement dwellers. It can also appear at times that the comments can be used as thinly veiled criticisms as to how criticism towards comics or the medium in question is presented. Just to kind of like, yeah, take that. And we have seen this throughout the history of fandom. You will often find the episode or the issue or the work where it's, ew, fans, ew, collectors. And again, it's not to say that there aren't those negative aspects to explore, but there are other aspects and it can be more complicated and nuanced than that. And when one just sees the same narrative over and over and over again, it can become a bit tiresome. Especially if one is a member of fandom and has seen so many things go down. Not only is online hate a microcosm, a drop in the bucket of what goes on here, the way it's presented in many works just ends up as a very generic anti-bullying PSA, kind of like, don't leave mean comments. That's mean. Go outside. Touch some grass. They are also often characterized as the mean commenters always being in the wrong. Not necessarily because of the tone or the words they use, which would be an argument to potentially explore, but just for writing them in the first place. Now, this falls a bit into the generic dab on the haters. I just dated myself so much, but just that kind of ignore the haters, you can find your own self-worth rhetoric, which is an interesting choice to make through the villain of the story, Punchline. And not just any villain, a straight up murderer. Now on this website, it's constructed from the viewpoint of somebody hating on her for being fake, which does appear to be something that she's concerned about. But the idea here is that this is more of an aberration. Whereas in a more balanced work, it would be acknowledged that she would have different types of haters. But this type of hate seems to be coming from a subset of her fandom, like antis. So someone battling with someone who is a fan of her, rather than someone who is being critical of her entire existence in general, which there would be a lot of. Like, yes, the subset of antis would exist, but also there would be other types. When you see someone reach such big heights, you'll often find that there are a variety of different types of discussions going on about them, not just one. And it's such a missed opportunity not to mind that and have that be the root of what she's afraid of. People who are leaving these comments but who are right about her. Because then you could see a flip side and twist and show her disconnect. And then you could make a kind of layered commentary on what's going on. Also, the hate comment is so mild on an anti-form. Two-faced, more like 4 or 5-faced, says someone's username. Super fake. Just, I mean, could we have some higher effort or more varied hate comments? Joker's pick-me girl, hardly sloppy seconds. Clowncore, more like just clown. I thought jokes were supposed to be funny. And also like some weird ones like, show your feet, I want to see your tongue. I got that one the other day, it was weird. I just made those up. I mean, there are also real Punchline haters in the real world. I'm sure there was tons to mine there too. Might have been stronger than just one comment. Now picture this, because you could use this same scenario to really grow her personality and character and just really give some more details about the type of person that she is. You can keep the same comments about how she's fake, but also add more. How can anyone believe her? It's so obvious that she's fake. Basically add some more details. And also add some that are very vitriolic, but have them still be accurate, correct at base. Now a dialogue is being created, something for the reader to interrogate. What happens when the haters are right? Punchline is gonna fight back with the usual rhetoric that is usually presented as correct, as it will be here. I know this website, a bunch of losers who don't get that hating on me is exactly the same as fawning. Lawyer. Fake. Grew it myself, not that it matters. Pick a new rumor. Really? That's the rumor we're going with? That she has fake hair? What about some rumors that she's the Joker? I feel like that would be more something that people would be rumoring about. Her hair is fake. Again, everything's just so tame and not really. If we're gonna mine the filth and the muck, like, can we show how some people get? Like, you don't have to be completely vulgar, but come on now. It's a cesspit on here sometimes. A cesspit. They swarm, suffocating me. I can't remember the last time I was ever overwhelmed like this. Ever. I need a way out, and I can see it through those grotesque gray grasping. Come on, come on. Block button doesn't budge. It's a concrete brick weighing a ton. The other buttons work fine. I did it. I beat the internet. The problem with framing it through the standard context of mean comments are mean is that you're presenting this through Punchline, the person who has a podcast where she talks in detail about recreating the Joker's toxin. But if we were to reframe this as these people are right, and okay, they're rude and excessive, and maybe making 3 or 4 long-hour expose videos appears to be a bit much, which she will talk about on the surface, that sometimes these people can be correct, and even in their seemingly extreme actions, they can be discussing or exposing important things, and then bringing that to attention of other people. And then that raises the question of, well, how does one deal with that? Does there need to be some kind of policing of the comments, or can people who still have negative intentions hide inside of the nice words? Also, again, acknowledging the variety of people who are on the internet. And if we're going to talk about terminal onlineness, it should be important to note that some people who are terminally online have families, jobs, all kinds of things, and that's actually interfering with their lives. That's a whole other thing to discuss, being jacked in when you have a whole bunch of other things going on. Basically, you could introduce nuance into this. And then her fear of these comments takes on a whole new level. But instead, the focus remains on Punchline being proficient and above it all. Whoever is doing this, you picked the wrong battleground. And then we get to the one vulnerable moment that is so Punchline is indirectly a child murderer and a torturer and more. And so by using Punchline for a stand up for yourself, ignore the haters, the comments, they can get to you, but you know what, stay true to yourself message, it creates a bit of a disconnect between the message and the character being used to present it. And so then you just have this kind of jarring experience that can be happening unless one is then meant to look at Punchline more sympathetically, and hence that takes away some of the bite of the character, or it just pushes some for more vile actions into the background. Like dead children, it's fine though, because people said mean things on a messaging forum. And all of this could have been rectified with a few small tweaks. So let's see the vulnerability. Let's try that again. Let's see the vulnerability. I'm pretty sure there's nowhere to land in the infinite scroll. Gasp. I've seen better cosplayers. I'm not bothered. You keep saying that. You're not bothered. You're not triggered. Why should I be? This is obviously some weird gas or drug or illusion. If that's true, why are you still here? Well, that's a silly question, Insomnia. What, you can just snap out of your hallucinations? I've just got to outlast it. Let it wear off, and then, or maybe you're here with me because you can't turn the video off. It's not as deep as... I know what they're trying to say with that, like, just close it. And they're trying to make a commentary on how people tell you to just stop looking at it or ignore it, and how that doesn't always work. Again, the Punchline choice of the character to illustrate that. Are people making fun of your online apology where you say the Joker tricked you into loving him when you were manipulated? Just turn that off. I can't even hear the gasping, panic breathing sounds I know I should be making. I am left with nothing but the memory of watching a glowing screen in a dark room. Judgments, opinions, voices, none of them mine. All of them taking root in my mind. I was right before. There's no bottom to the infinite scrolling comments. This page. So we're trying to say that no, she is super bothered, and all of this murder and the like was a response to shut out online hate. It reads that way. Or are we meant to take it as even though she's done all these things, she still is vulnerable to online hate, and it still hurts. You can introduce moments in a villain's backstory where they are experiencing something that other people have that may be sad or one could potentially relate to, but not try and present it in a way that's meant to render them sympathetic. So that's why it's so odd to see this done with Alexis. In this scenario, once more, a character flaw is dodged or not further explored. No, not the nihilistic drug lord. There's no end to the infinite scroll of the negative comments about how she pumped all her drugs into Gotham and people think she blew up that factory and got an entire neighborhood addicted, or how she incited a riot like Kai Cenat. Issue 6 had some solid moments and no editor's notes that lied to me. Of all the things that could have been done talking about the internet, this one suits the character the least and does not play with some of the more interesting questions surrounding manipulation or online negatives that could have been mined. And I'm gonna say it makes the story feel very, I know it's gonna sound harsh, mundane, pedestrian. Think of all the things that happen online, and don't even go to the dark web. Like, we don't even need to go that deep. Secret discords or group chats that have minors and there's grooming or all of those things happening. Crypto scams, social contagions that lead to people faking disorders or being concerned that there's something wrong with them, and say that time on TikTok when everybody was eating papaya seeds because they were convinced they had a parasite. Or other trends that happened before, people eating Tide Pods, lighting themselves on fire, just all of those ideas that can end up proliferating. People who fake crimes or fake being kidnapped for clout, or more simple things like just being so deep into the quest for content that one doesn't see the one slowly shifting or falling into very negative traits, and the next thing you know, you're filming a corpse in the suicide forest and not think there's anything wrong with putting the actual corpse in the thumbnail after you spent the day throwing Pokeballs at people in Japan.
Just gotta be careful to not like disrespect the culture. Toyota, I choose you. No, I gotta catch you. Okay, get him. Honey, get him.
Just gotta be careful to not like disrespect the culture.
Or when you see a guy get knifed and you film his corpse.
The toddler and Schmidt's fiance watched him die.
Disappointed in people that would post it.
There's a lot to be discussed about potentially the desensitization or the disconnect of one's real life and viewing it as content. Again, so many things. More general things. Isolation, loneliness, the pressures of being a content creator and no longer being able to live in the moment, losing mindfulness, overconsumption because you get caught up in hauls and all kinds of things, feeling that one isn't enough. I'm just spitballing. These are things that are just coming off the top of my head. The point is, there's a wealth of topics to cover on here and many ways that they could be incorporated into a character like Punchline. Unless this is some kind of deep meta commentary, like it's a 4D chess move. I'm playing regular chess and DC's playing 4D chess. But if it is, I guess I'm not getting it. Well played. There could also have been opportunity here to be able to see her turn around and weaponize things that are true and critical of the negatives of the internet for her own gain. Just to see somebody warp it like that, and then that would play again to her manipulative personality. So you can keep the flippancy and the arrogance, but paint her as in the wrong. You can use Punchline to interrogate a question. Is social media the cause of negative behavior or a symptom? Because there are some people who feel that it's the concrete cause, others that feel that no, people gravitate towards it and these things happen because of other symptoms in society, or is it some kind of combination? It's a classic question, but it's being asked in a new way through a new technology. New-ish, because it's not that new anymore. What does it mean when you have a tool that someone like Punchline can exploit in this manner, that can lead her to people like the Joker? And again, that's why it's good to have Babs as a counterpoint, because then you can also see positives of how like her use of it can bring people together and build a network and then have people who are helping people. So again, they could be parallels. I'm so disappointed. I can see the comments now. You're too obsessed. Why are you so triggered? Yes, I am a little triggered. George is getting upset because there's so much potential for stories involving digital culture and how it's evolving. And it's just a bit disheartening to see another mean comments or mean story, at least for me, because I have read so many. I will acknowledge that potentially other people have not read as many, or they will enjoy seeing these themes worked through and feel that it is being presented in an interesting way, especially because the vernacular and use of terminology feels genuine and comes across as someone who has encountered this kind of speak on the internet or in person. But even with the comments, again, you could interrogate it a different way. For example, you could showcase how, because the comments are so mild, make a point of that these online spaces that one can curate, you can end up creating echo chambers where even the mildest dissent can now appear huge. And then that can trickle down to not being able to handle any kind of criticism. Handling criticism is a skill. You know how many times I've been told I talk too fast, or my videos are boring, the sound's bad, lighting's bad? You know, sometimes those things are true and they hurt, but you need to try and learn and grow. Now, there was an interesting part in here where she falls into the void, and you could have done something with that too. How about she falls into the internet, past the comments, and then she finds nothing? Like a Patrick Bateman kind of, I simply am not there. Like even the hate comments are part of how she constructs herself, and what would she be without them? That's interesting to explore too. I can't help it, I'm invested in this character. I know that for some she's just a derivative knockoff, and I totally understand why people would see that and where they're coming from, but I think she has potential. Anyway, Punchline beats the internet. She's an unbothered queen. She doesn't need to care about anyone's opinions, and neither do you. Whoever you are, you wanted to convince me that I cared, huh? That I was one of those forum losers obsessing over every word, every picture, every decision, tried to kill me with caring about their opinions, but it's the nonsense of nightmares, meaningless. Judging them isn't the same as caring what they think. I do really like the panel where after defeating not symbolic zombie babs, she hits the like button. There are some fun moments in here, and the way the paneling is utilized can be interesting, and the art is good. Also, one could read this as a story highlighting how scary Punchline is because she can overcome her fears so easily. I can see a realm where some just read this as a fun popcorn filler issue, especially if one enjoys Alexis as just kind of a baddie, I don't care kind of character, which is one of her strengths, that she's just an unapologetic villain. It's just in this sense of this scenario of we're exploring people's inner fears, this would have been an interesting place to potentially add a bit more depth. And again, that doesn't have to take away from her just being a person who is bad. That could have been something that is explored as well. As a result of how all this comes together, it ends up being very, as the kids say, time of recording mid. Remember, don't read the comments and obsess about what people say online. Anyway, that was a long, ranty video essay about my favorite clout goblin, Punchline, from someone who is probably terminally online. In conclusion, the problem with Punchline is that she lacks direction and is oftentimes used to make comments on the internet that are either incomplete, lacking in nuance, or are the point the creator is looking to make without fully integrating into her character or making sure the scenario is tweaked to match her. But I want to hear from you. What do you think? Do you think Punchline is just a poor concept? I just care way too much. If you think that you made it all this way, thank you. You are a trooper. Do you think this story suits her and that I'm just entirely wrong and that this is the perfect tale to tell with this character and that it really humanizes her to show that these things affect her too? Do you just think that I really should go touch some grass? What would your ultimate nightmare for her be? Ooh, here's another one. What if it's tech related in a different way? Like we land her in a world where there is no tech, and so there's no way for her to put herself out there, and so she's just a nobody, an anonymous nobody. That could be something else she's afraid of, and that could be really interesting to explore. The ideas, they won't stop. Share some of yours down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time, a lot of your time out of your day to discuss comics and specifically Punchline with me. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that I got so passionate. I'm also working on the nerdiest video I've ever made about how Tom Strong's speech bubbles kind of exemplify that who he is as a person. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed, and next time we're gonna do something different and probably calmer. I will see you again soon. Yeah. Tell me what you think. Bye-bye.